It was my safety net. It was supposed to be my golden years, my freedom from worry. But as I sat in that lawyer's office 3 months ago, staring at the number on the settlement papers, all I could think was, I can't tell anyone the real amount. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 63 years old. For 38 years, I was a surgical nurse at Vancouver General Hospital. I'd seen every kind of human suffering, every type of emergency. I thought I knew how to read people, how to spot danger. I was wrong. The settlement came from a medical malpractice case, though not one involving me directly. 5 years ago, I was in a car accident on the Trans-Canada Highway near Kamloops. A transport truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the median. My car was totaled. I spent 4 months in physiotherapy, and I still can't turn my neck all the way to the left. But the real damage came later, from the hospital where they treated me initially. They missed a fracture in my spine, sent me home with basic painkillers. By the time another doctor caught it 6 months later, the damage was permanent. I'll live with chronic pain for the rest of my life. The lawsuit took 4.5 years. My lawyer, Patricia Moreau, told me from the start it would be a long battle. The hospital had deep pockets and excellent lawyers. But we had the medical evidence, the x-rays, the timeline. In the end, they settled rather than go to trial. $1.2 million, minus legal fees and taxes. I walked away with $875,000. I'd been dating Gerald for 7 months when the settlement came through. Gerald Bouchard, 58, recently divorced, worked as a wealth management consultant at a firm in downtown Vancouver. We'd met at a community center dance class. I'd signed up because my physiotherapist said gentle movement might help with my pain. Gerald was there because, as he told me later, his therapist suggested he needed to meet people after his divorce. He was charming, not in an obvious way, but in the kind way, the listening way. He asked about my day, remembered small details, brought me tea with just the right amount of milk. After 30 years of being single, of focusing on my career, of watching my married friends deal with difficult husbands, Gerald felt like a gift. He was attentive without being clingy, successful without being arrogant, affectionate without being demanding. 3 months into dating, he told me about his financial troubles. His ex-wife, he explained, had taken him to the cleaners in the divorce. She'd gotten the house in North Vancouver, half his retirement savings, and he was paying substantial spousal support. He wasn't asking for money, he made that clear. He just wanted to be honest about where he stood financially. He was living in a modest apartment in Burnaby, driving a 10-year-old Mazda, watching every penny. I appreciated the honesty. It made him seem vulnerable, real, not like those men who pretend to have more than they do. When the settlement came through, I was in the lawyer's office alone. Patricia had warned me not to tell anyone the exact amount right away. People change when they know you have money, she'd said. Even good people. Especially people close to you. Take some time, think about what you really want to do with it, and keep the details private until you have a solid plan. I nodded, but inside I was thinking about Gerald. Surely he'd be happy for me. Surely this was different. That night, Gerald took me to dinner at a nice Italian restaurant on Commercial Drive to celebrate. He ordered Prosecco, held my hand across the table, told me how proud he was that I'd fought for what I deserved. Then, as the waiter cleared our plates, he asked the question, "So how much did you get?" If you don't mind me asking, I'm just curious what these cases usually settle for. Something in his tone made me pause. Not the question itself, but the way he asked it. Too casual, too carefully casual. "It was a decent amount," I said, "enough to retire comfortably." "That's wonderful, Margaret, really wonderful. But I mean specifically, what kind of number are we talking about? Couple 100,000? More?" I took a sip of my Prosecco. The bubbles felt sharp in my throat. "Just under 200,000, I said. "After all the fees and everything." I watched his face. There was a flicker of something, disappointment maybe, but then he smiled and squeezed my hand. "That's still fantastic. You deserve every penny." But the questions didn't stop. Over the next 2 weeks, Gerald brought up my settlement 6, 7, 8 times, always framed as concern, as helpfulness. "Have you thought about investing it? You don't want it just sitting in a regular savings account. Inflation will eat it alive. I could introduce you to some colleagues at my firm. They specialize in conservative investments for retirees. With the right strategy, you could probably double that money in 5 to 7 years. I kept deflecting. I told him I needed time to think, that I was still processing everything, that I wanted to be careful. Each time, he'd nod understandingly, but I could see the frustration building behind his eyes. Then one Saturday morning, Gerald showed up at my apartment in East Vancouver with his son. I'd met Trevor Bouchard twice before, briefly. He was 32, worked in finance like his father, dressed in expensive suits that seemed too tight across his shoulders. He had Gerald's smile but not his warmth. His handshakes were too firm, his eye contact too intense, like he was always trying to establish dominance. "Trevor's here visiting from Toronto," Gerald said cheerfully. "He's just in town for the weekend. I thought it might be good for him to meet you properly. And actually, he had some ideas about your settlement that I thought you might want to hear." I made coffee. Trevor sat at my small kitchen table, and Gerald pulled up a chair beside him. They had the same posture, the same way of leaning forward, hands clasped. "Dad told me about your situation," Trevor began. "First of all, congratulations on the settlement. Second, I have to say, keeping $200,000 in a basic account is really a missed opportunity." "I haven't decided what to do with it yet," I said carefully. Of course, but here's the thing, Margaret. May I call you Margaret?" He didn't wait for an answer. "The thing is, I work with high net worth clients who are looking for solid investment opportunities. Real estate development, specifically. There's a project in Calgary right now, mixed-use development, residential and commercial. The returns are projected at 18 to 22% annually. Much better than anything you'd get in traditional stocks or bonds." I sipped my coffee. It was too hot, burned my tongue. "That sounds risky," I said. "It's not, though. That's the beauty of it. The developer has a track record of successful projects going back 15 years. The building permits are already approved. Construction starts in 3 months. All we need is investors to commit to the funding. Your $200,000 would be perfect. You'd see returns within the first year." Gerald put his hand on my knee. "I've looked at the numbers, Margaret. Trevor showed me everything. It's legitimate. His firm has already committed their own capital to it." "How much capital?" I asked. Trevor hesitated, just for a second. "We're still finalizing the amounts, but substantial. This is the kind of opportunity we usually only offer to clients with portfolios over $2 million. But because you're with my dad, I'm willing to make an exception." "That's very kind," I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, too high. "But I think I need more time to consider it." Trevor's jaw tightened. "The thing is, the investment window closes in 2 weeks. After that, we'll have reached our funding cap. I'd hate for you to miss out because you waited too long." "Then I guess I'll miss out." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Gerald's hand left my knee. Trevor leaned back in his chair, his smile gone. "Dad said you were cautious," Trevor said. "But honestly, Margaret, at your age, being too cautious is just as dangerous as being reckless. You've got, maybe 25 years left if you're lucky? You want to spend them worrying about money, or do you want to actually enjoy your retirement?" Gerald didn't defend me. He just nodded along, like Trevor was making perfect sense. They left 20 minutes later. Gerald kissed my cheek, but it felt perfunctory, cold. "Think about it," he said. "Really think about it. This could change everything for you." After they left, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at nothing. My hands were shaking, not from the pain in my spine, but from something else, something I didn't want to name yet. That night, I called my friend Diane. We'd been friends for 40 years, since nursing school. She'd retired 2 years earlier and moved to Victoria with her husband. I told her everything. "Margaret," she said when I finished, "listen to me. I don't care how nice Gerald seems. Men don't bring their sons to pitch investments to women they care about. That's not romance, that's business. You think I'm overreacting? I think you're underreacting. How much did you really get in the settlement?" I told her. She was silent for a long moment. "Don't tell him," she said. "Don't tell him the real amount, ever. And do me a favor, Google Trevor Bouchard and see what comes up." I did. It took about 15 minutes of searching, but I found it. Trevor Bouchard had been named in a lawsuit 3 years earlier in Ontario. An investment group he was affiliated with had raised money for a real estate project in Mississauga that never materialized. Investors lost a combined $1.7 million. The case was settled out of court, no admission of wrongdoing, but the company dissolved shortly after. Trevor had moved to a new firm 6 months later. My stomach turned over. I kept searching, found more, different projects, different companies, always the same pattern. Big promises, aggressive timelines, pressure to invest quickly, then silence. Then lawsuits or complaints. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Gerald called. His voice was different, sharper. "Have you thought about Trevor's proposal?" "I'm not interested, Gerald." "Margaret, I really think you're making a mistake here. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "For who? For me or for Trevor?" Silence. "Then, what's that supposed to mean?" I looked him up. I saw the lawsuits. Gerald's voice went cold. Those were misunderstandings. The investors in those cases didn't understand the risk involved in development projects. Trevor was cleared of any wrongdoing. Settled out of court is not the same as cleared. "You know what, Margaret? I thought you were smarter than this. I thought you understood how the real world works. But you're just going to sit on that money like a scared old woman, let inflation eat it away, and end up with nothing in 10 years. Fine, that's your choice." He hung up. I sat holding the phone, my hands shaking again. He called back 4 hours later, apologetic. He'd been stressed about work, he said. He hadn't meant to snap at me. Could we have dinner that week and talk properly? I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to believe I was wrong about him. Maybe I wanted to believe that 38 years of reading people hadn't failed me. Maybe I just didn't want to be alone again. We met at a restaurant in Kitsilano on Wednesday evening. Gerald was on his best behavior. Flowers, compliments, the attentive listening I'd fallen for 7 months earlier. But every conversation somehow circled back to money. How was I managing my settlement? Had I talked to a financial advisor yet? What was my long-term plan? I kept my answers vague, and I watched him, really watched him. The way his smile didn't reach his eyes when I changed the subject. The way his hands clenched when I said I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. The way he checked his phone constantly, like he was coordinating with someone. "Gerald," I said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you so interested in my money?" His face went blank. "I'm not interested in your money, Margaret. I'm interested in your financial security." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Why do you care so much about what I do with my settlement?" "Because I care about you." He reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Margaret, what's going on? Why are you being like this? How much were you going to get? If I invested with Trevor, how much was your cut?" The mask slipped, just for a second, but I saw it. Anger, frustration, calculation. Then the concerned boyfriend face came back. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." We stared at each other across the table. The restaurant noise, the clinking glasses and laughter from other tables seemed very far away. "You lied to me," Gerald said finally. "About the amount. You got more than 200,000, didn't you? Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. Couples don't lie to each other, Margaret, especially about important things like money." "We're not a couple," I said quietly. "We're a target and a con artist." Gerald stood up. He didn't yell, didn't make a scene. He just looked at me with something like disgust and said, "You're going to regret this. You're going to die alone with your money, and it won't keep you warm at night." Then he left. He didn't pay for dinner. I sat there for another 20 minutes, forcing myself to eat even though I had no appetite, refusing to let him ruin my meal. But I couldn't stop shaking. The next day, I called Patricia, my lawyer. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "I'm going to give you the name of someone you need to talk to." The someone was Detective Sarah Kowalski with the Vancouver Police Department's fraud unit. I met her at a coffee shop on West Broadway 2 days later. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a notebook she filled with neat, precise handwriting as I told my story. "Margaret," she said when I finished, "I'm going to be honest with you. What you've described isn't technically illegal. Asking someone to invest money isn't fraud unless they actually take the money under false pretenses. Have you given them anything?" "No." "Good. Don't. But here's the thing. Gerald Bouchard and Trevor Bouchard are names we know." My coffee went cold in my hands. "We've had 3 complaints about them in the last 18 months. Different women, all in similar situations. Older, single, recently came into money through inheritance or settlement. Gerald meets them, dates them for a few months, gains their trust. Then Trevor shows up with an investment opportunity. Pressure to invest quickly, promises of high returns. 2 of the women gave them money. One lost $60,000, the other lost $95,000. Both investments went into shell companies that dissolved within 6 months. Why haven't they been arrested? Because they're careful. The companies are technically legal, the investments are technically real, just poorly managed. When things go wrong, they blame market conditions or regulatory delays. It's not provable fraud. It's just deeply unethical. What about the 3rd woman?" Detective Kowalski smiled grimly. "She got suspicious and backed out before giving them any money. Like you. We've been watching the Bouchards, but we can't build a case without more evidence. We need to catch them in the act, with documentation of the fraud." She looked at me very directly. "Would you be willing to help us?" My first instinct was to say no. I'm 63 years old. I've worked hard my entire life. I deserve peace, not to become bait in a police investigation. But then I thought about the 2 women who'd lost their money. I thought about how many others there might be, women who hadn't reported it, who were too embarrassed or afraid. I thought about Gerald's voice on the phone, cold and calculating, and Trevor's smile that never reached his eyes. "What would I have to do?" I asked. The plan was simple. I would contact Gerald, apologize for overreacting, say I'd thought about the investment and wanted to hear more details. I would wear a wire to our meetings. I would ask specific questions designed to get Gerald and Trevor to explain their scheme in detail. Most importantly, I would not, under any circumstances, actually give them any money. "The moment they think you're transferring funds," Detective Kowalski said, "we move in. We need to catch them actively defrauding you." I called Gerald that evening. It was one of the hardest phone calls I've ever made. I had to sound apologetic, uncertain, a little desperate. I had to pretend I was a lonely old woman who couldn't bear to lose him, who valued his attention more than her own judgment. He was suspicious at first. But I played it perfectly. I cried a little. I said I'd been talking to other people who made me paranoid, but I trusted him. I believed in him. Could we start over? There was a long pause. Then, "Of course we can, Margaret. I've missed you." We met for lunch the next day at a restaurant in Yaletown. I wore the wire, a tiny device taped to my chest under my blouse. Detective Kowalski and her partner were in an unmarked car half a block away. Gerald was attentive again, warm, the man I'd first met at the dance class. But I could see through it now. Every smile was calculated, every touch was strategy. "I've been thinking about that investment," I said, stirring my soup, "the one Trevor mentioned. Is the opportunity still available?" Gerald's eyes lit up. "It is. But the window closes in 5 days. After that, they've reached their funding goal. How much would I need to invest?" "Well, you mentioned you had close to 200,000. That would be perfect." I took a breath. "Actually, Gerald, I wasn't completely honest with you. The settlement was larger than I said." His hand stilled on his water glass. "How much larger?" "875,000. I watched him try to keep his expression neutral, but I saw the flash of greed, the quick calculation. This wasn't a small score anymore. This was major. "Margaret, that's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me before?" I was scared. Patricia, my lawyer, told me not to tell anyone. "But I trust you, Gerald. I know you care about me." He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was sweating. "Of course I care about you, and you can absolutely trust me. This is good, Margaret. This is really good. With $875,000, we can get you into a much better position with the investment. Instead of the standard returns, Trevor can probably get you into the premium tier. We're talking 25 to 30% annually. That sounds almost too good to be true. It's not, though. This is how wealthy people make their money. They invest in projects before they're available to the general public. Your settlement is enough to change your entire life, Margaret, but only if you use it wisely. Over the next hour, Gerald laid it all out. I would transfer the money to Trevor's company account. They would pool it with other investors' funds and deploy it into the Calgary development project. I'd start seeing returns within 8 months. There would be quarterly statements, professional management, complete transparency. How much of my money should I invest? I asked. Gerald barely hesitated. All of it. You want maximum returns? You need maximum investment. Think of it this way, Margaret. Right now, you have $875,000 sitting in an account earning maybe 2% interest. That's $17,000 a year before taxes. But invested properly, you could be earning $260,000 annually. In 5 years, you'd more than double your original amount. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong. But if you're worried, we can start with a smaller amount, say $400,000. See how it performs over 6 months, then invest the rest. $400,000, still nearly half my settlement, still enough to destroy my retirement if it disappeared. I think I want to do it, I said slowly. But I need to talk to Trevor first. I need to understand exactly where my money is going. Of course. I'll set up a meeting. Can you do tomorrow evening? Yes. Gerald paid for lunch this time. As we walked to our cars, he put his arm around my waist. I'm proud of you, Margaret. You're making a really smart decision. This is the beginning of a beautiful future for us. Us, not you. Us. That night, I met with Detective Kowalski and listened to the recording. Her partner, Detective James Murphy, made notes while the tape played. He's good, Detective Murphy said. Never quite crosses into legally actionable fraud. All the red flags are there, but he's careful. What about tomorrow's meeting with Trevor? I asked. Same plan. Let them talk. Ask questions. The more detail they give about where the money goes, the better. And Margaret, Detective Kowalski, looked at me seriously. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. You don't owe us anything. But I did owe someone something. I owed it to the women who'd already been scammed. I owed it to the women who would be targeted next if Gerald and Trevor weren't stopped. The meeting with Trevor was at a downtown office building the next evening. 8th floor, a suite with Trevor's company name on the door, Bouchard Capital Management. It looked legitimate. Expensive furniture, diplomas on the wall, a receptionist who smiled professionally as she showed me to a conference room. Trevor wore a navy suit and a smile. Gerald sat beside him. They had documents ready, spreadsheets, prospectuses with glossy photos of the Calgary development project. It all looked incredibly professional. For 2 hours, they walked me through the investment. Trevor did most of the talking, using financial jargon I barely understood. Gerald translated, made it sound simple and safe. They showed me testimonials from other investors. They showed me architectural renderings of the building. They showed me bank statements proving the developer's financial stability. It was impressive. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed every word. So to confirm, I said, reading from the agreement they'd slid across the table, I transfer $875,000 to this account number, and it gets pooled with other investments into the Calgary project. Exactly, Trevor said, and I get quarterly statements showing my returns. Yes, who manages the actual construction? Who's the developer? Trevor named a company I'd never heard of. I wrote it down carefully. And they're based in Calgary? That's right. Can I visit the site before I invest? Trevor and Gerald exchanged a glance. The site isn't open to investors yet, Trevor said. Security concerns during early construction. But I can send you photos, video footage, whatever you need. And if I want to withdraw my money, is there a penalty? Another glance. The investment has a 2-year lock-in period, Trevor said. Standard for development projects. Early withdrawal would forfeit your returns and incur a 20% penalty. 20% of $875,000 is $175,000. Correct. But you won't need to withdraw early, Margaret. This investment is solid. I pretended to think about it, looking at the papers, biting my lip. Then, I'd like to transfer the money tomorrow. Can we do that? Gerald's face broke into a huge smile. Trevor leaned back, satisfied. Absolutely. I'll send you the account details tonight. All you need to do is call your bank and authorize the wire transfer. Simple as that. And when will I start seeing returns? First quarterly statement will be in November. You'll see the growth immediately. They walked me to the elevator. Gerald kissed my cheek. I'm so happy for you, Margaret. This is going to change everything. The elevator doors closed. I made it to my car before I started shaking again. Detective Kowalski met me at my apartment an hour later. We listened to the recording together. This is good, she said. Really good. They've committed to specific claims, specific timelines, specific penalties. Now comes the hard part. The plan was for me to call the bank the next morning and authorize the transfer, but only partially. I would transfer $100,000, not the full amount. This would do two things. Prove I was serious enough to actually move money and give Trevor and Gerald a reason to pressure me for more. Once they realize you've only sent a portion, Detective Kowalski explained, they'll panic. They'll get aggressive. That's when people make mistakes. I barely slept that night. In the morning, I called my bank and set up the wire transfer, $100,000 to the account number Trevor had provided. The bank representative asked if I was sure, reminded me about wire fraud scams, asked if I knew the recipient personally. I said yes to everything. The transfer would go through by end of day. I called Gerald at noon. It's done. I sent the money. That's wonderful, Margaret. Trevor will be thrilled. There's just one thing. I only sent $100,000. I want to see how the first few months go before I commit the full amount. Silence, long silence. Margaret, Gerald's voice had changed. No more warmth. That's not how this works. The investment tiers are based on total capital contribution. $100,000 puts you in the basic tier, which has much lower returns. You won't see the growth we discussed. I understand, but I'm more comfortable starting smaller. You don't understand. Trevor structured this expecting your full investment. $100,000 messes up the entire allocation. You need to transfer the rest of the money today. I can't. I need time to think. You've had time to think. You signed the agreement. You committed to this. I committed to investing, not to a specific amount. Gerald's voice went cold. Margaret, I'm trying to help you, but if you're not going to take this seriously, maybe this isn't right for you. Maybe it's not. He hung up. 20 minutes later, Trevor called. He was much less friendly than Gerald had been. Miss Chen, we need to talk about your transfer. My father says you only sent $100,000. That's not what we agreed on. I sent what I'm comfortable sending right now. That's not acceptable. The investment minimum for the premium tier is $500,000. Anything less, and we can't guarantee the returns we discussed. Then I'll take the lower returns. It doesn't work that way. We have contractual obligations to the developer. We promised certain funding levels. If you can't meet your commitment, we need to return your money and find another investor. Fine. Return my money. There's a processing fee. 15%. You said early withdrawal was 20%. That's after the lock-in period starts. Before that, it's 15% for processing. $15,000. I closed my eyes. Here it was, the pivot from investment opportunity to threat. Once they had your money, any money, they found ways to keep it. I'd like to speak with my lawyer before proceeding, I said. Your lawyer can't help you with this, Miss Chen. This is a binding agreement. You signed it. If you back out now, you forfeit the processing fee. That's standard business practice. I don't remember a processing fee being mentioned yesterday. It's in the fine print. Page 7, Clause 12. Maybe you should read contracts more carefully before you sign them. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen, hands shaking, feeling sick. Even though I knew this was all part of the plan, even though the police were involved, even though my money was being monitored, it still felt terrifying. This was how it happened. This was how they intimidated people into silence, into compliance, into handing over everything. My phone rang again. Gerald. Margaret, I think we got off on the wrong foot earlier. Can we meet and talk about this face to face? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. I care about you. Let's just have coffee and discuss this calmly. Against Detective Kowalski's advice, I agreed. She wanted me to cut contact, let them make the next move, but I wanted to see Gerald's face. I wanted to see if there was any remorse, any humanity left under the con artist. We met at the same coffee shop where I'd first talked to Detective Kowalski. Gerald was already there, looking tired and stressed. He stood when I arrived, tried to hug me. I stepped back. Margaret, I'm sorry about earlier. I was under a lot of pressure from Trevor, from the developers. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. How much were you going to get? I asked. From my investment. What was your percentage? He didn't answer. Gerald, I deserve the truth. How much? 20%. Trevor gets 30, I get 20. That's how these partnerships work. I did the math. If I'd invested the full $875,000, Gerald would have made $175,000. Trevor would have made $262,000. Together, nearly half of my settlement. And the Calgary development project? Is it even real? Gerald looked away. It's complicated. No, it's simple. Either it's real or it's not. There is a project. It's just not as far along as Trevor represented, and the returns aren't guaranteed. But Margaret, listen, if we can pool enough investor capital, we can make it work. Your money, combined with others, would actually help fund a legitimate development. You'd still see returns, just maybe not as quickly as we said. So it is a scam. It's not a scam. It's just optimistic projections. That's how all investments work. You have to believe in the potential. Believe in the potential with other people's money. Gerald reached for my hand. I pulled away. Margaret, I do care about you. That part was real. But I also need this to work. My ex-wife is bleeding me dry. I'm 68 years old with almost nothing in retirement savings. Trevor came to me with this opportunity, and yes, it's aggressive, but it's also our best chance to secure our futures. Our futures? I was hoping, after this worked out, that you and I could build a life together. With the returns from your investment, we'd both be comfortable. We could travel, buy a place together, really enjoy our later years. I stared at him. He actually believed this. He'd convinced himself that conning me out of my settlement was somehow an act of partnership, of building a future together. I want my $100,000 back, I said quietly. I can't do that. It's already been transferred to the project account. Then transfer it back. Margaret, be reasonable. There are penalties, processing fees, legal obligations. I'm done being reasonable, Gerald. I want my money back, and I want you to leave me alone. His face changed. The mask finally came off completely. You're making a huge mistake. You could have had everything. Now you'll have nothing. I'll have my dignity. He leaned close, and for the first time, I was actually afraid of him. His voice was low and harsh. You think you're so smart, but you're just a bitter old woman who's going to die alone. Good luck with your $875,000, Margaret. I hope it keeps you company. He left. I sat there for a long time, trying to stop shaking, but I'd gotten what we needed. His admission that the project wasn't as represented, his acknowledgement of the percentages, his confirmation that my money had been moved without full disclosure of the risks. It was all on tape. Detective Kowalski's team moved quickly after that. Within 48 hours, they'd traced the account where my $100,000 had been transferred. It didn't go to any development project. It went to a personal account in Trevor's name, then was immediately distributed to 3 other accounts, including one in Gerald's name. Classic money laundering pattern. They also found something else. 5 other investors over the past 2 years, all older women, all in similar situations. Total losses, just over $2 million. Some of the money had gone into real estate projects that actually existed but were vastly overvalued. Most of it had simply disappeared into personal accounts, spent on Trevor's lifestyle, Gerald's debts. 2 weeks later, the police arrested both Gerald and Trevor at Trevor's office. I wasn't there, but Detective Kowalski showed me the video later. Trevor tried to run. Gerald just sat down at the conference table and put his head in his hands. The trial took 8 months. I had to testify, had to sit in that courtroom and recount everything. Gerald's lawyer tried to make it seem like a simple business disagreement, a failed investment opportunity rather than deliberate fraud. But the wire recordings were damning. Gerald's admission that the project wasn't as represented, Trevor's aggressive threats about penalties and fees, the money laundering trail, it all painted a clear picture. Gerald got 4 years. Trevor got 7, plus restitution orders. My $100,000 was returned, minus legal fees. The other victims got partial restitution, though nothing close to what they'd lost. After the trial, I met the other victims at a support group Detective Kowalski recommended. Their stories were heartbreaking. Linda, 71, had lost her late husband's life insurance payout. Janice, 66, had lost money she'd been saving for her grandchildren's education. Pauline, 63 like me, had lost her divorce settlement and was now living with her daughter because she couldn't afford rent. They asked me how I'd known, how I'd seen through Gerald when they hadn't. I told them about Patricia's advice to keep the amount secret, about Diane's warning to look up Trevor, about that moment in the restaurant when Gerald asked specifically, "What kind of number are we talking about?" And something in his tone made me pause. But mostly, I told them about instinct, about that sick feeling in my stomach that I'd tried to dismiss as paranoia or loneliness or old age, about how I'd almost ignored it because I wanted to believe Gerald cared about me, because I was tired of being alone, because 7 months of companionship felt too precious to question. "I'm 63 years old," I told them. "I spent my entire career in medicine, learning to trust my diagnostic instincts. When something didn't look right, when a patient's symptoms didn't add up, I learned to pay attention to that feeling. I almost forgot that lesson when it came to my own life. It's been 3 months since the trial ended. I'm still in my apartment in East Vancouver. I'm still learning to live with chronic pain. I still have most of my settlement, though I'm far more careful now about who I tell, about who I trust. I did invest some of it, but with a legitimate financial advisor Patricia recommended, someone with decades of documented history and transparent fees. Conservative investments, nothing flashy, nothing promising returns that seem too good to be true. I haven't dated anyone since Gerald. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. I'm okay with either outcome now. Diane asks me sometimes if I regret helping the police, if the stress was worth it. I tell her yes, absolutely. Because Pauline and Linda and Janice and the others deserve justice. Because somewhere out there, there's a woman who won't become Gerald's next victim because he's in prison instead of on dating sites. Because I can look at myself in the mirror and know I did the right thing, even when it was hard, even when I was terrified. The lesson I learned isn't complicated. It's not about specific red flags or investment strategies or how to spot a con artist, though all of that matters. The real lesson is simpler and harder. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. When your gut tells you something's wrong, listen to it. When the people who claim to care about you are more interested in your money than your well-being, walk away. You've spent your whole life building your resources, your security, your future. Don't let anyone, no matter how charming or persuasive or lonely you are, take that away from you. Your instincts are there for a reason. Trust them. Protect yourself. And never, ever feel guilty for being cautious with your money or your heart. If you're in a situation right now where someone is pressuring you to invest, to share financial information, to move quickly before you miss your chance, please stop. Talk to a lawyer. Talk to the police. Talk to someone you trust who has nothing to gain from your decision. Real opportunities don't disappear overnight. Real partners don't pressure you about money. Real love doesn't come with investment pitches. And if you're wondering whether you should tell the truth about how much money you have, remember this: the right person will care about you regardless of your bank balance. The wrong person will disappear the moment they realize there's nothing in it for them. Better to find out which one you're dealing with before you risk everything. Take care of yourselves out there. Listen to your gut. And most importantly, listen to your instincts. Your gut knows things your heart doesn't want to admit.